Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound. As always, I am your host, Jameson Foster, and today I am honored to welcome a guest that I have been wanting to talk to on the channel for a very long time, Mr. Lassi Logrén, who, on top of having a very rich career in traditional folk music and also as a composer, if I read correctly, you wrote some of the music for the Lord of the Rings musical. On top of this, wide, diverse background you have, we are here today to talk specifically about your new album, Jouhikko, and your experience playing this instrument that is just gaining popularity by the day. And considering that the Jouhikko is a pretty big part of the global Nordic music scene today, thanks to Varjuna and other bands, it's just such a treat to be able to talk to someone who is quite well versed in the instrument's history and performance in a way that made me rethink the way that I think about the instrument, the Tagelharpa or the Jouhikko. So, Lassi, before I gush over you any further, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself? Say a little bit about where you're from, anything that you want people to know before we get started.
All right. Thanks, James. I'm really happy to be here and visit your channel. And I'm a Finnish folk musician. I've been living most of my life in Finland, but nowadays we are living in Oslo, Norway. But at the moment, I'm in Finland. We have some Christmas concerts, actually with the band Freya, starting on after 2 days. And it's now 6th of December, so it's the Independence Day of Finland. So I'm happy to celebrate it now, right here.
That is right. Yeah, I completely forgot to mention that in the introduction, that it is a special day to be having a conversation about Finnish music and the Jouhikko, because it is Finnish Independence Day, and you posted a beautiful clip playing Sibelius's Finlandia earlier that I loved it.
Yes, I did it like maybe 2 hours ago. So I was growing up like 50 kilometers from Helsinki, and both of my parents, they are musicians. So me and my sister and brother start to play instruments pretty early. I was 5 when I started with the violin. And it's this story as usual. We started as a classical music because on that time it was no other music schools than classical style. But my father played also like folk music, and actually I was 7 or 8 when I started to play folk music in a group where all the other players were actually adults, so I was the youngest one there. And then we moved to eastern part of Finland, very small village called Rääkkylä, and there me and my brother and sister, we joined to a big children's folk music group called Värttinä, and I'm still on that band. I was a few years away 2 times, but so it's pretty long history with that band Värttinä. And on that time I was 12 years when I started to play Jouhikko, and since that I've been playing that. I'm calling it Jouhikko, but maybe Tagelharpa is maybe more common, like worldwide.
Which is a shame, because I think the Jouhikko is a better name. It's more fun to say. I think it has a charm to it.
I agree, but it's not that popular anyway. So that's like this is like short story. Then I studied folk music as at the Music University Sibelius Academy in Helsinki, and since that I've been like a freelance musician, played mainly fiddle, but I've been playing this Jouhikko all the time. And now in recent years I've been doing my PhD studies on Jouhikko at Sibelius Academy, and actually those studies were kind of, when I started those studies, I decided, okay, now it's time to concentrate to Jouhikko, and that's what I have been doing recent years, and the last result is then the album you mentioned called Jouhikko. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So you started playing the Jouhikko at 12. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you've
So
been playing it a lot longer than I thought, because I'm going to assume
yeah.
that you were 12 more than a few decades ago. So in that way, you were you were kind of ahead of the curve on that. Um, and so I guess my question there would be how, like, is the Jouhikko more common in traditional music in Finland than I'm assuming, or was that a pretty unusual instrument for a 12-year-old to get into?
It was very unusual instrument for 12 years old. So I was quite a lot like freak to play that instrument. So it started, let's say, 1976
Hmm.
or 78. Instrument builder called Rauno Nieminen started to
Hmm.
build Jouhikkos. So, and before that, there were some other uh, builder who played them like again because the okay, but on it was like 1987 when I started to play Jouhikko, and on that time, yeah, there were some players, mostly those young students at Sibelius Academy folk music department,
Hmm.
which was pretty new thing on that time. Um, but but after that has happened a lot in Finland and also in Estonia. So nowadays it's not a mainstream instrument at all, but pretty many, I don't know how many people would know that instrument if you are
Yeah.
asking on the street. Like I would say maybe more than 30% of Finnish people might know that instrument. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
how did a 12-year-old end up getting into playing such a strange instrument then?
Yeah, it was this band I mentioned earlier, Värttinä, which was
Hmm.
like children's group at that time. We visited in instrument makers company in Leppävirta, and they made mainly kanteles, but also some other instruments. And there, one Jouhikko was hanging on the wall, and then our uh, on that time our leader Sari Kaasinen showed me that instrument. That Lassi, if you play like Finnish folk music, like on violin, you should know also what is Jouhikko and play that instrument. And then I tested it, and immediately I like felt like okay, I do want to play this. And then when we got back to home, I told to my parents that I tested this one weird instrument called Jouhikko, and I really would like to have that. Could you please buy that for me? And then they agreed, and then I just started to learn it by myself.
Hmm.
And yeah, I got some like um, lessons in one summer camp
Hmm.
from one folk fiddler who had more experience of Jouhikko than me on that time. But after that, I've been mainly learning by myself.
Yeah. So you are, if I am remembering correctly, I think you are only the third Finnish musician I've had on the channel in the whole time I've been doing this. So I actually have a more general question for you before we go specifically down the Jouhikko route. Um, I am a huge fan of Sibelius. When I went to start my musicology degree, my two sides that I had to pick between was Edvard Grieg or Sibelius. And I just knew more about Grieg, but I've always had this soft spot for Sibelius. And I've also found that when I read about Finnish musicians, regardless of genre, um, Sibelius almost always comes up when they talk about their upbringing. I know for example the singer of Insomnium mentions that the reason his parents got him music lessons as a child is because they thought that he could be the next Sibelius, and so I'm for personal reasons, for selfish reasons, I just want to ask specifically, like, does Sibelius still hold like a really, I guess, prominent place in like when when Finnish people talk about Finnish music? Is Sibelius still like this mythical force for Finnish music? That sort of is like the thing to aspire to.
Mm, yeah, maybe depending on the genre
Hmm.
you you're talking about, like, but yes, maybe Sibelius is still the one composer
Hmm.
in Finland, if have to pick one that everybody are thinking as kind of,
Hmm.
I don't know the word the best, but kind of the most well known and kind of the
Iconic.
most, yeah,
Yep.
iconic, the yeah, kind of important. Also because his the time he lived and the um, those work he did, they go like hand to hand with the this Finnish national, how do you say, when Finland got independence.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that, and that this early like early years, and the years of the war, and for
Hmm.
example this Finlandia hymn I just played online a few hours ago. So they are like a pretty big part of Finnish like music culture. I have to say one like personal
Yeah, yeah.
aspect or story.
Please.
I just heard, yeah, a few years ago. My father told me that when he studied at Helsinki University, he sang on a choir, which that choir still exists. The Finnish name is Ylioppilaskunnan laulajat, and they they went to um, uh, sing to Aino Sibelius when she was still alive
Okay.
in uh, Ainola, the place, the house where they were
Hmm.
living. Okay, Jean was already dead or
Hmm.
that time, but Aino was alive, and they sang to Aino, and this Aino stand on the balcony and was like waving to the choir. And for me, this is like, wow, okay, you have like sang to Aino Sibelius,
Yeah.
said to my, yeah, okay, that was just an anecdote. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that you shared that because that actually
Mm,
goes to show that it's still a
mm,
pretty big deal.
mm,
And yeah, I don't mean to ambush this to turn into a Sibelius conversation.
mm,
But I just wanted to take the chance to ask you about that because yeah, especially on Finnish Independence Day, talking about
mm,
the place that Sibelius had in the independence movement was quite strong. He was in a lot of ways a someone to look up to or like as a leader in a lot of ways.
mm.
But yeah, so we can return to the conversation of the Jouhikko.
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
definitely wanted to talk Sibelius a little bit. I don't get
Yeah.
many opportunities.
Yes.
So
Sure.
yeah, yeah. So you mentioned that you go in a lot of different ways with playing folk music, but the Jouhikko stays or it kind of stays at the hearts of what you're doing as a musician, even if you are
Mm,
playing the fiddle or any other instrument. The Jouhikko has kind of been this constant throughout your life since you were 12. So since during your formative years,
mm,
and so now at this point in your career, Jouhikko the album only came out this year, and you say it's a part of your studies as well. So I guess we already talked about how you picked up the instrument itself. But so I think going from there, I would like to ask you once you have the instrument in your hands, how do you know what to play, how to play? Like, what is the tradition of the Jouhikko that you sort of inherit when you pick up that instrument? Because there's a lot of mythology around the Jouhikko. that it is this ancient, like Bronze Age, Iron Age instrument, and all of these stories that surround it. But there's this very specific history of it that goes back to at least the 17th century, and there's the little statuette in the Trondheim Cathedral that is, at least to me, I think it's quite clearly a Jouhikko or a Tagelharpa.
Mm.
So I guess all of this is to dance around a specific question, which is when you learn the Jouhikko, what is the tradition like? How far does it go back? Is it pretty similar to just the fiddling tradition in general? Anywhere you want to start with sort of where the tradition of playing the Jouhikko comes from as you understand it. I would love to hear that story.
Yes. Okay. We know that Jouhikko has been played in Finland, in Karelia, in Estonia, but how long time ago we don't know exactly. But then there were some music researcher, like folk music researcher, who met some Jouhikko players, like one the most famous one was Armas Otto Väisänen, and one was Otto Andersson, and they transcribed those melodies from the players in Karelia and in Estonia, like roughly 1916 was really active year, but also before that. So at that time, those Jouhikko players, they played kind of like, I think they were no like only like Jouhikko melodies. They were playing the melodies they knew and they could play on Jouhikko, but they were also like the repertoire was partly same than kantele repertoire, but maybe if I'm talking about Finnish or Karelian tradition, I have here this instrument.
Beautiful.
Yeah, some like the basic elements were that there were like 6 notes melodies. So 6 notes, really easy to play with Jouhikko without doing like any changing or without changing the string. So it was on that time that we're calling like it tradition was like 6 note dancing melodies, and also some like songs that we know that people were singing those songs, and then they were also possible to play on Jouhikko. So that's like one short answer.
Yeah. So that actually makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider that a lot of traditional melodies, regardless of if they are sung or if they are played on the fiddle, or even if they are just played on a regular harp or anything that's more similar or that's more simple, they rarely have more than those 6 notes anyway. Especially once you go back old enough. You know, a lot of the oldest melodies don't actually have that many that large of a range in the melodies. So yeah, I hadn't actually really thought about the fact that when you lay out the notes that it can play, it has a lot of overlap with many of the melodies anyway. So it should be a pretty easy task as a musician to just take a melody that people know and figure out how to play it on a Jouhikko.
Yes. Yeah. And then in Estonia, they were using more like 4-string instruments. They are calling them hiukannel or Tagelharpa. Especially the islands which are on western part in Estonia, there were living like minority who were speaking Swedish, and that Tagelharpa is like Swedish language. So they had a little bit like 1900, they were really active playing culture there, and they were using also like they switched the strings, so they were playing like more than only 6 notes, and the same music researchers Otto Andersson and Armas Otto Väisänen also visited there, and yes, some other researchers also, not only those two ones. Yes, so basically what I'm thinking that before violin came to Nordic countries, there were like a little bit more simple bowed instrument, which was this kind of instrument. Of course, the design and model, there was like different ones, but anyway, so basically bowed instrument without the fingerboard. So if some listeners here, if you don't know, the player is making more than only 3 notes out of 3-string bowed lyre by touching the string on the fingers. And I'm using mainly this traditional style, using back of the fingers. Nowadays, the more popular style is use like fingertips or the front side.
That's how I play it.
Yeah.
In the very amateur way that I play it. Whenever I pick up mine to try and figure out a melody, that one feels the most natural to me, at the very least.
Yes.
And that's probably because I come from playing the upright bass, where it's a lot of the similar hand styles. Yeah, and I like that you bring up that there's a because of the distance over which this instrument is played, that leads to a lot of different ways to play it, but also to tune it, or just the different amount of strings. Because I know that a lot of people, when they try and pick up a Tagelharpa or a Jouhikko, and they Google how do you tune it, or they Google how do you play it, you get so many different answers, but none of those answers explain that this is how they do it in this place, or this is how they do it in this place. Instead, we're used to things like guitars, where there's typically one way to tune it, unless you're into like serious death metal or something like that. But it is confusing for people when they pick up that instrument, where they are hoping that there's one way to tune it or one way to play it, and then they find out that there are all of these different ways to play it based on which tradition you're sort of learning from.
Yes, exactly. And then also there are like 3-string instrument and 4-string instrument, and they are like different tunings. And I'm using mostly like horsehair strings, just twisted horsehair. And nowadays people likes to build pretty massive, like long instruments.
The massive bass ones.
Yes, yes, it's like, and with those instruments, horsehair strings are not working. So they have to be some other material, and but those questions are pretty difficult if somebody is asking, like, okay, how many horsehair I would need to put to my instrument. It depends on the tuning, of the size of the Jouhikko, your like personal taste. So, but putting this shortly, you just have to test different amount of horsehair and then test different tunings. For example, on my this album Jouhikko, I used like maybe 5 or 6 different tunings. On
I noticed.
On 3 strings harpa. I mainly tuning the middle string. All the time, the two like on left and right, they are all the time for that album. There is like one whole step between those. But then when I'm the level of the tuning is varying. Sometimes it's like, but when I'm tuning the middle string, then I will get different kind of scales, and that's one kind of theme of that album, actually, to have like 5 or 6 notes songs, but they sound somehow different because of the different tuning. Yeah.
I never would have guessed that you limited yourself in that way to just, that range of notes, because, I've been very open with you about how much I adore this album. And not once have I listened to it all the way through and thought, Oh wow, he's only playing six
Yeah,
notes or
yeah, yeah.
something like that.
Well,
It's
okay,
it's
I have
very
to.
organic, yeah.
Okay, I have to correct myself.
Yeah, yeah.
There are songs that there
Hmm.
are more than six
Hmm.
notes, especially they are like a little bit older
Yeah.
composing I have done, but recently
Hmm.
I have kind of more and more I have this like challenge and
Hmm.
desire to write songs with 5 or 6 notes
Hmm.
as a task.
Yeah.
Partly because I do want to kind of carry that tradition of
Hmm.
Jouhikko music, and partly because I have little kind of pedagogical thoughts also that
Hmm.
I feel good if somebody else is playing those melodies also.
Yeah, so
So
like a true
yeah,
folk tradition. Like you
yeah,
know, you're
yeah.
not creating music that only you're allowed to play, right? Like creating
Yes,
music that you're
exactly,
trying to
exactly.
give it to the world in some
Yes,
ways.
exactly, exactly. The one way is to make music that nobody else than the player or the composer can play. That's fine. That's
Hmm.
interesting music, like kind of virtuoso, shocking, difficult music. But
Yeah.
I do get more like I'm more happy if somebody is playing my melodies than somebody is not playing,
Yeah.
like kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
and that is, you know, what we are talking about, where that is kind of the
Mm,
magic of what makes folk music, right? Is you don't really,
mm,
in most cases,
mm,
you don't really need permission to play a tune, so long as you are, you know, a part of the tradition, or even if you're not a part of the tradition, you know, I know that a
mm,
lot of musicians are like yourself.
mm,
It's not about creating something amazing that has your name on it as much as it is
mm,
about just taking this brief time that we, not to get existential about it, but taking this brief time that we have on this planet and doing
mm,
something meaningful with it, and giving a little part of
mm,
yourself to it. And I can imagine writing a piece of music that speaks to other people in a way that they will pick up a Tagelharpa and they will play it must be
mm,
like the ultimate dream as a traditional Jouhikko player.
mhm. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and I also like that you bring up how non-dogmatic this instrument is, or how there again, there's not one way to do it, and especially with making them nowadays, I laugh every time I
Mm,
see one of those massive bass toggle harpas,
yeah,
because you know part of me thinks that's ridiculous, but the other part of me also says that sounds cool.
yeah.
But then you also have I know two bands. So Vardruna and Nutland are two bands that use the Tagelharpa or the Jouhikko a lot, and I know that they use either steel strings or nylon strings, for the purpose of just not having them go out of tune in the middle of an hour long set, or you know all the different climates that they have to
Mm,
play in when they're touring around the world. So there is another adaptation. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Is it's a very versatile instrument that is really
mm,
dependent on if you can tune it the way you want it to, or whatever strings you want to do, go for it, because that's sort of what makes the instrument so attractive to people, I think, is that versatility aspect of it.
yes, yes, exactly. And also, like, I think it's like violin, something. Well, it's more difficult to build, and the sound is kind of like clear and kind of clean.
Hmm.
But this Tagelharpa and Jouhikko, the sound itself is like more like earthy and like how do you say, crispy. So I think that it's it's somehow inviting people like,
Yeah.
hey, please try. You can have like some sound, and it's kind of um, there is not that high step
Hmm.
to like go with. And I think partly because of that it's more and more popular. But and
Hmm.
I love that there are not like standard uh, Jouhikko shape or Jouhikko sound, or
Hmm.
so as you said, there are like so many different. Of course, then okay, I have to say about these huge instruments. Okay, with the metal strings or nylon strings, the sound is really like yeah, nice, like bass, wow. But then playing melody of those big instruments, it's not impossible, but it's challenging, and it's not
Hmm.
not that handy instrument for melody playing. So
Yeah.
so I'm encouraging every time people, if they want to play some melodies,
Hmm.
well then how about building a little bit smaller instruments? But but it's their choice, of course, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's free to play or build anything.
Yeah, so I actually want to return to this conversation later
Mm, mm,
about the different ways that the instrument is being played, because we are sitting here praising the versatility of the instruments. But
mm,
you are right now talking about something that happens more and more nowadays, where the instrument is being played less and less melodically, which is
mm.
creating this sense that the instrument itself is not melodic. And I just that is a conversation that I would love to have after we talk about your album more
Yeah.
specifically, because your
Mm,
album uh, shows without argument that the Jouhikko, the Tagelharpa, is an incredibly melodic instrument. And not only is it melodic, it can also be delicate as it is earthy. There are so many times listening to this album where I was really impressed by how light of a sound you get out of this instrument, the sensitive sound that you get out of it when I'm used to hearing it just hammered away in drones.
mm,
Um, but I guess before talking about those specific melodies, a lot of people who listen to the Nordic Sound are very into really old things. And I read on the Folk Alarm profile for you that you have an interest in 17th century players. And I feel like a lot of people might be interested in whatever, even if it's just a minimal amount. Um, what do you know, or is there anything that you want to share about what you know about the tradition that goes back to the 17th century, or the players that go back to the 17th century, and sort of what you've learned from that and how you apply that to how you play the instrument today?
yeah. Maybe on the text you read,
Hmm.
prop the 17th century sounds like a bit early to
Okay.
know some players. Maybe we know some names of
Yeah,
that
yeah. Then
the
if you want
period,
to correct it, if
but
there's a different time period.
it's more, I would say, like 19th century.
Okay.
There we know like some like songs, some name of the players,
Hmm.
actually some instruments in museums. But this 17th century, it's more about imagination and guessing and like what kind. So we really don't know. I'm afraid.
I'm glad I asked. No, because
Yeah, yeah,
if you Google your name,
yeah.
one of the profiles that comes up is what
Yeah.
the Folk Alarm wrote
Okay.
for you, and they say the 17th century. And even though you are not really sure that that's the century
Yeah.
that they mean, I think
Yeah.
there is still a productive comment that you made, that even
Mm.
back to the 17th century is too old to know much, which I think
Yes.
is an important conversation to have, because especially with the, this growing Viking music interest in knowing
Mm.
exactly what Viking music sounded like, or trying to guess,
Yeah.
it actually puts it a lot into perspective that you're saying that even the 17th century is still a little old to know too much about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that. Yes. But as like the I think the only we know about this old Jouhikko tradition was those limited
Mhm.
scale for sure, and then I think that it was it was both dance music, but for sure it was also music that people just played for fun to just
Mhm.
entertain themselves.
Mhm.
Maybe I don't know, maybe to do playing like while singing something, but I'm not sure if that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So about the music that it's called nowadays, like Viking music, I don't I don't I don't have much to say about Jouhikko and like in the specific historical music which was played
Mm-hmm.
during the Viking era
Mm-hmm.
on Jouhikko. I have to say I don't know.
No one really does.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, I mean the Spotify playlists and YouTube video titles really do, try and paint the Tagelharpa as a Viking Age instrument, when in
mhm,
reality it most likely was not, because the earliest we have of it is that little statue from the Trondheim Cathedral, and that's
mm,
several hundred years after Vikings. But that
mm,
itself is a very thorny conversation to get into. But I think what you said earlier about the sound of the Tagelharpa itself, the sound of the Jouhikko, um,
mm,
being earthy. I love that you use this term as a traditional folk musician,
mm,
because
mm,
I'm used to hippies, and not
yeah,
that I'm saying you can't be a hippie because you're a
mm,
traditional folk musician,
mm,
but like in these new age, communities,
mm,
the ways that people talk about this instrument are actually very similar to how you're talking about it as a
mm,
traditional player who studies it at a very high
mm,
level. I think that the sound of the Tagelharpa being earthy, and because it's not so clear as a violin,
mm,
it has this mysterious sound to it that I
mhm,
think invites people to have an imagination about it
mm,
being an ancient instrument, just because of the way that it
mm,
sounds.
mhm. And for me, it's also kind of human sound,
Hmm.
like because it's a little bit like fragile. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of like just playing that horse, especially horsehair string. You
Mhm.
really don't know what is going to happen. It's kind of like and that's kind of as a life, I would say. So yeah,
I love that you bring that
yeah,
up, because it
yeah,
any note can just
mm,
not happen. You
yeah,
can bow it,
yeah,
you can put your finger there. That doesn't mean
yeah,
that the note is going to happen.
yes,
I
yes,
remember I
exactly,
was
yeah,
watching your performance. I think it might have been at Folk Alarm. You play
mm,
Levine Polka and
mm,
one other tune.
mm,
And I'm sort of watching on the edge of my seat, waiting for a note to not happen. And
mm,
luckily, you went through that whole set
yeah,
with the instrument cooperating. But that
mm,
is not always guaranteed. And I love that
yeah,
you
yeah,
think that that adds to the humanity of the instrument.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say that. And And one thing I maybe want to mention about this album, I played
Mhm,
everything like as a solo,
mhm,
and that was not I was thinking a lot to add some instruments on it because nowadays the music we are listening in Western world, let's say, is mostly something else than solo performance. It's like bands or orchestras or music made with computers or
mhm,
like different machines. And nowadays, and I think we are kind of learning that the music which is touching us is pretty big music,
mhm,
like lots of like different sounds and or pop song. Some new elements are being added, like every 5 seconds or something, and like we are kind of we want that music is kind of developing pretty fast, and mm, I decided to do an album like an opposite way, so having only like one sound and okay, it's developing but not that hugely than many other instruments. And I'm thinking that also our capacity of concentrate is nowadays kind of like being like down. Uh, so this is kind of test also for my point. Is this kind of music, is it like touching people? Can people listen only one instrument, like instrumental music? And okay, some people can, but I'm kind of curious to know, like, is there more than 10 or 20, or I don't know, because that, so that was kind of decision I made when I started to do this album. Okay, only Jouhikko, one instrument, no over over recording,
Mhm.
not like many
Dubbing,
tracks,
dubbing, or
dubbing. No,
any
yeah,
tracks.
no,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so that that's the result then. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you that just I've noticed more and more people, it's becoming sort of an underground scene of its own of doing
Mm,
these solo instrumental albums. Um,
mm,
I have done some myself that are just
mm,
banjo. Or
mm,
I have albums that are, one track is just banjo and then the next one is just mandolin. Um, because I agree with you completely about everything you
mm,
just said essentially.
mm,
I
mm,
I teach music appreciation here at CU where I
mm,
have to show my students that are 18 to 20 years old music from across the world over a millennia. I literally start with music from the 900s. That is our first music that we listen to. And the
mm,
class is pretty much ends with death metal and gangster rap. Like that is the range of music
mm,
that this class
mm,
has to listen to. And what you say about attention spans and concentration is
mm,
completely accurate. I have students that they make the joke proudly whenever I ask them to talk about a piece of music that we listened to together, that this one didn't put them to sleep, right? It becomes like this way of them saying that something is good is that
mm.
they were kept entertained the whole way through. And
Yes.
that's almost always the music that it has a music video with it. So it's not even just audible, it's also the
Mm,
visual component.
mm,
Um, and again, those layers and the complexity of it, maybe not even complexity, but yeah, as you said, just so much stimulation. And
mm,
I think the question of is this always a good thing is a very good question to be asking because to me, I've always loved those solo instruments, albums or works. I know Bach's partitas on the violin were some of my favorite music to listen to. And the reason I picked up the mandolin was because of Chris Thiele's album of just Bach preludes on the mandolin. So I have always had a soft spot for these solo instrumental albums. But I find that exactly what you were talking about. The music culture that we live in the West is so chaotic and
mm,
overstimulated that I
mm,
also wonder what are we losing? What do we lose when we're not able to just listen to one instrument, which
mm.
has been typical, especially in Europe, for thousands of years, is you have one instrument
Exactly.
that plays.
Mm,
So this is just a long-winded way of me saying that not only do I see, the effects of constant overstimulation with music, but I also see a growing interest from this underground, be they in the in that medieval, ancient music scene on this side,
mm,
or the traditional musician side, that we are all starting to wonder, what if we went back to one instrument? And what is the experience like when we sit down and just give one instrument our attention? And I
mm,
will say, from my point of view, it's a borderline spiritual experience. Like to have when
mm,
you have a musician that captures you with one instrument for the
mm,
length of an album, that's a very, if not spiritual, it's a very personal experience
mm.
that leaves a very different impression on me than when I listen to an album with a band. So do you want to say anything more about, I guess, the idea and the philosophy behind the that use of solo album? If you just want to say anything more on this, I would love to hear it.
Well, well, maybe one thing that as you said, like people have played or sang music mainly as a solo, like hundreds, thousands of years. And I think that when somebody is like listening that, or somebody listened that, he or she got like touched, and he or she got kind of like a emotional experience only for that one player. And I think we still have that same emotional experience, but nowadays we are just quite often got it from the huge like music. But,
Yep.
but I hope, I believe that, as you said, it's possible to also get from the smaller musical performance. But that's maybe something we have to kind of relearn, because we have kind of our brain has like we have learned that it has to be big, that it's good. And also when talking about kind of cultural politic, it's also like kind of rule that if something is like small, if there is one flute player, it can't be on the main stage, or it can't be the kind of head performer on the festival. It has to be like a big band. So it's also different values of the music, and that's something it shouldn't be like that. Like
This is the kind of conversation I love to have, man. I mean, you know, I love what you say here about it's a relearning in a lot of ways, because I know that people can feel defeated if they try and listen to one instrument. Like let's say that someone hears this conversation and they're like, yeah, I want to try that. But it's difficult to, when you're used to hearing so much, it's not as simple as just sit down and listen to this, and if you can't get through it, you fail. It's like it's a practice. Like try sitting through one song. Think about how it was different to you. And I just love what you're emphasizing here, is that it's not a can you do it or can you not do it. It's more about just getting used to and retraining yourself, or practicing these different ways of listening to music, in what we can broadly call active listening, is when you sit down and actually actively listen in a way that's more engaged. And so you're asking yourself, how am I feeling about this? How am I feeling about that? And the last thing I'll say is that we might just be talking here about how human it is to just listen to one musician. And I think there's a pretty strong relationship between that aspect of listening to one instrument and the same thing that you were just talking about with the Jouhikko in particular, where the Jouhikko sounds human, right? It's imperfect, it's raw. So combining, I think it's a perfect match. A solo instrument album that is the Jouhikko are just these elements that are really challenging you to face a music that is very human in a lot of ways. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Well, I'm continuing this Jouhikko, that even if it's if I or somebody is playing it as a solo instrument, there traditionally there is still like two notes played at the same time. So actually, when I'm playing a Jouhikko, actually I don't feel kind of lonely. Never. I feel that I have this drone note. I'm playing with the drone note all the time. So when I'm playing one note, one melody note, and then there is a like different sound together with the drone note. So it kind of I think it's easier to play alone and easier to listen also as a solo instrument compared with, let's say, tin whistle, like which is like only one. So that's like one point of Jouhikko solo music. Yeah.
That was actually very beautiful what you just said, that you're never alone. You have a drone. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's adorable. It is.
Mm,
I'm not alone up on
yeah,
that stage. I have my
yeah,
trusty
yeah,
drone. It's
yeah,
my friend.
yeah.
It's my therapist. It helps me through.
Yes,
And that's
yeah, yeah,
actually an
yeah.
important point that many traditional solo instruments do have a drone. I just mentioned
Yes,
the banjo. The
yeah,
traditional way of playing the banjo is clawhammer, where
yes.
your thumb is constantly playing that higher drone. The hardanger
Mm-hmm,
fiddle is another
mm-hmm,
example where that
mm-hmm.
is a very drone. That instrument is played with a lot of drones.
Yes.
The
Or
nyckelharpa,
yeah,
right?
or bagpipe,
The
bagpipe, like
bagpipe as well.
or this munharpe, how
The
do
yeah
you
yeah.
call that? Yeah, yeah, they're all like medieval instruments. Also, five-string kantele when you are playing it, and all those strings are like you are not like um, shutting them or damping them
Mhm.
after you have played them. They are all the time like uh, ringing. So there is also kind of drone thing. Quite often, this highest one you can
Mhm.
hear the most. So that's kind of drone instrument for me also. Like,
Yeah, because if not literally a drone, you have these
mm,
instruments that have a lot of sympathetic vibration, like
yes, yes,
the
yeah, yeah,
nyckelharpa and
yeah,
the hardanger fiddle,
yes,
and the
yes, yeah, yeah,
kantele. The resonating body of it just
yes,
creates that shimmer, that echo. Um,
yes,
God, I love
yeah,
this. So,
yeah,
so in talking about this album, we've covered a few things here.
mm,
The desire to create a different experience just by virtue of having a solo instrument
mm,
throughout the album.
mm,
You have this way of what I noticed in this album is that I personally cannot tell the difference immediately between what is a traditional melody and what is your own original melody. So that talks about what or that goes back to what you were talking about, where you sort of want to contribute or to give something to this tradition. And in that way, I think you succeeded quite a bit. And you were
mm,
also now talking about how you also went into this wanting to keep that drone as a core part of of the listening experience because for you as a performer that drone is your best friend. It's your guardian
yes,
angel.
yes,
Your gnome that is watching after you to make sure
yes,
things go fine.
yeah, yeah,
So these
yeah.
are all great. And is there anything else about this album that you would want to talk about outside of those three things that we haven't covered yet?
I have so many
Yeah,
many
yeah.
things, but maybe one I could say something about the style, like
Please.
the musical style. So your channel is like
Hmm.
Nordic folk channel, um, but if I had to describe the style of the music of that
Hmm.
album, that would be difficult because for me there are uh, different styles,
Hmm.
and for me it's maybe more like there are I'm inspired by different traditional music or fiddle styles in Europe. I would
Hmm.
say that more than only this is definitely it's not like Finnish tradition. It's not like only Nordic
Hmm.
traditions, but it's like I would say like different European
Hmm.
traditions, and that's because of I have played different. Like I have played Irish music, and I have played like a little bit like Balkan music and stuff.
Hmm.
And actually, when I started to put those songs on the order and kind of thought about like what songs I would pick up, I didn't think about at all like like is this stylically like proper on this album or not. It's just the music that I've been writing and I've been playing and I love to play. And I would say that somebody else can then maybe describe or decide what is the style, but I don't actually care. It's just music which comes from my background, and yeah, they all are like written by me, by the way, those
Okay.
songs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I I am so grateful for you bringing this up because
Mm,
whenever I'm talking to folk musicians who
mm,
are working today. Just
mm.
last week I talked to the duo Villa and Tommy. You might know Villa
Yeah,
Suri.
I know.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I know them. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were just talking last week
Mm,
about this idea of for folk music, should it just be an attempt at doing the same thing over and over again and not changing or not allowing outside influence? And
mm,
I went on a soapbox about how Americans are very protective of traditions
mm,
just because they were put somewhere else. So
mm,
Americans have this anxiety around how much change are we allowed to let into these music traditions that our ancestors brought over. But and then also on the more Puritan side of folk music in
mm,
Europe as well, you also have
mm,
that idea that you have to do it one way and you cannot
mm,
allow outside influence or else then it's not
mm,
authentic. But
mm,
we went down this conversation that, at least from where I'm standing and also from their point of view as well, in a lot of ways it is more authentic, if you even want to get into the conversation of authenticity, to just be yourself as a musician when you were playing this music.
mm,
Because for
mm,
centuries, I mentioned Mularguten in Norway. I can't
mm.
imagine Mularguten not trying something new because it wasn't the tradition,
Yes.
instead
Yeah.
just. And then also when you consider how much these musicians traveled, especially in coastal communities, where you were
Mm,
constantly having people from around the world set up their ship, get off, get something to eat, get lodging, and
mhm,
in a lot of situations play music. So this idealized kind of folk music where it was played this one way and it never changed for hundreds of
mm,
years
mm,
is very utopian, but I don't want to
mhm,
call it utopian because that sounds like a hell to me where nothing ever
mm.
changes. But
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at here is that what you
Mm,
were saying here about you are a human that has had
mm,
these experiences as a musician and
mm,
you just want to express who you are as a human musician
mhm,
with all
mhm,
of this background that you have playing all these different styles of music. And you
mm,
don't really care if someone calls it this kind of folk music or this kind of folk
mm,
music. What's important to you is that it's you that is playing
mm,
it. I
mhm,
think that to me is what folk music is about, is
mhm,
just allowing yourself to be totally human in this largely acoustic setting, but in a way where you are participating in a tradition that has been passed down while at the same time not being imprisoned by it, right? It's
mm,
this dance between what you've been given and what you give, I think,
mhm.
is that place that you occupy as a folk musician. Do you want to say anything more about that dance between uh, heritage or what you've been given, but then also what you're allowed to do as your own autonomous musician?
Yeah. 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 You are speaking very like wise, wise words.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah. Um, yeah. Maybe one thought that as we know that it's every time like one traditional melody, there are like different versions of it. So like because people have like heard it somewhere and wanted to pick up it and started to play it, and then they changed it a little bit, and that's kind of natural thing. It wasn't like, oh, I can't learn this one because this song belongs to this valley. I have to just leave this great song and shit. I can't like. So oh, it's opposite way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, um, okay, I will say if I remember now. I lost my thoughts, but anyway, it's yeah. On the album there are like different. Okay, one thing, of course, it's different to make a concert or an album that I'm picking only the melodies that has been played in western part of Estonia,
Hmm.
from particular player, and then I could say that the style I'm playing, I'm kind of trying to play the style that this player maybe played. But still, if I haven't met him, if I haven't heard him playing, if there is only like sheet music, it's of course just my way to play his or her style. But still, it could be like kind of concept albums or concerts. That then there are more like a kind of framed style. But this album I have is not that type of.
Yeah, and I think that just says a lot about, what I said, where I can't tell
Mm,
which melodies are yours and which are traditional, and for
mm,
you to tell me they're all yours. I think that
yeah.
shows that what happens when you create and express yourself, but with, I know you're probably a very humble guy, but what I will
Mm,
say is what I will say that you have a lot of knowledge um, of this tradition and just the
mm,
amount of hours over the course of your life that you've spent committing yourself to learning about these
mm,
traditions. The fact that
mm,
you can turn around and write an album of original melodies and have me wondering which ones are traditional, which ones are original, I think that goes to
mm,
show how that pays off or how important it
mm,
is, not to make it a value thing, but how
mm,
important it is to understand the tradition that you're working in when you are
mm,
expressing yourself, because
mm.
there's a risk of really falling on your face if you
Yeah,
don't know enough about what you're doing and then you try and do it. I see that
yeah.
happen all the time with people who aren't Nordic who try to do Nordic folk, and I
Mm,
watch what happens and I'm like, "Ugh, okay, that was rough,
mm,
but at least they're
mm,
trying."
mm. Yeah, and I love that people are like trying and playing and making their own music.
Mhm.
It's like because we have a big planet, there is like plenty of place for
Yep.
different like styles and different music, and
Mhm.
also like more this like punk attitude
Yeah,
that
yeah.
okay, we just do something now, and it's great. So yeah,
Yeah, and yeah,
but
so
then it's
I think the main point here is that
mm,
again, I also love that people are
mm,
trying to learn new things and do their own thing, but
mm,
I just think it's very important to put in the time to understand what you're trying to do before you do it. And that's why I'm bringing you up as an example of this, is because I think that you're a great example of, if you put the
mm,
time into understanding what you're doing, and the tradition
mm,
that you're borrowing from or that you're participating in, that pays
mm,
off quite a bit.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and I guess I want to use this as a segue to talk about Finnish folk music in general,
mm,
because, as I said, you are only the third Finn that or I guess if individual people, you are the fourth Finn, but you are my third Finnish guest.
mm,
And I know for a fact that most of my listeners know of Finnish folk music primarily through Korpiklani. And
mm,
I love Korpiklani too. But also Finland has this interesting history where, because of your Happy Independence Day, your
mm,
history of being, tossed around between Sweden and Russia and all these different places.
mm.
Um, the folk tradition has a lot is not as clean cut as it is in Sweden or Norway. I don't know if that's a controversial thing for me to say. I'm just an American.
Mm, mm,
But I guess where I want to go with this is, if people want to learn more about the Finnish tradition or try and understand, Finnish traditional music, what would you have to say before they jump in, or how would you advise someone who wants to learn more about Finnish folk music in general?
mm. Yes, as you said, the Finland is kind of between the Western, like Swedish, Norwegian, Scandinavian
Hmm.
culture and this East, like Russian culture. Um, and because of that, uh, there is no like the music culture called Finnish folk music, if you are really like trying to describe it. But we have like different cultural, different folk music cultures, and one maybe the most important culture I would mention is a singing culture called runo singing. So the singing culture, which last maybe 2,000 years or something, that people in the area which is called now Finland were singing a lot. They sang melodies with five or six notes actually, and they used a specific form of poetry, and about that culture, like a guy called Elias Lönnrot wrote a book. He was collecting poems, but he also wrote quite a lot by himself, and that book is called Kalevala, and it's like a Finnish national epos, but that singing culture is something that people who are interested in Finnish folk music, they should have a look, and they can just learn some melodies. And the melodies are pretty short and easy to learn, and then and why not also learn some Finnish sentences? There are some iconic, the most common melodies and texts, which are, for example, Vaka vanha Väinämöinen, tietäjä iänikuinen, and so on. So that's one thing. And one thing is maybe kantele, so plucked lyre or sitra instrument. Very easy to learn also, and very nice to play. It's very nice to instrument to just improvise and learn stuff. So that's one culture, but there are also many minority culture. For example, Sami culture. They have this singing kind of songs like Jouhikko.
I had Mariboina on, which was
yes.
still a highlight for me. I mean, that was insane. And so that was, there's a lot of regional variation, but there is some unified, idea or philosophy in the tradition of Jouhikko singing.
Yes. And then I mentioned maybe the third one, which is maybe more similar with Swedish and Norwegian, folk music culture, is this little bit newer, dance music, played on fiddles and accordions and clarinets, and so it's kind of dance music, polkas, mazurkas, polskas, and that's that's one part of Finnish folk music. And nowadays I can mention, for example, the band Frigg from Finland.
My favorite.
Which is,
I love that band so much.
Yeah, me too. So their music is kind of example of this, the third one I just mentioned. And,
I'm really glad that I'm asking you about this because, between you and me, don't tell the others, but I have a soft spot for Finland. I don't know why, but when I listen to the Finnish music and when I listen to the language, I tried learning it. It's not the easiest language to teach yourself. But there's always been something about this dance music style that you were talking about that it has a charm to it on the Finnish side that I don't hear as much on the Norwegian or Swedish side. And Frigg is an amazing example. Their last album, Perinto, is one of my all-time favorite albums. And then there's also the group 5/5. I don't know how to say the name. It's either 5 out of 5 or 5/5. And I've always been interested in how much Finns associate this music with specifically Finland, or if it is understood as a sort of trans-Nordic music culture. And it seems to me like you're telling me that there is an understanding that this music is this broader Nordic thing and less specifically Finnish. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. This newer dance music type of folk music as Frigg. It's I think it's it's part of the family of Swedish and or Norwegian music. And of course, also in Denmark, they are playing like lots of polkas, and it's kind of it's kind of the same family. But of course, in every country, they have like little bit like different stuff on that.
Yeah,
that,
all the different
umbrella.
variations and styles. So Lassi, I know it's not the easiest having a conversation this long in a second language or a third language, whichever language English is for you. Just let me know if you're feeling fatigued or anything like that. Cool. Yeah. So I have really two more things I want to talk about here. And I think I will start with so I will start with this one. So we mentioned earlier that the style of playing the Tagelharpa or the Jouhikko that is becoming the most popular is not very melodic. It's it really leans into the drones. At least from my point of view, I can hear how much of it is black metal that is just being played on the Tagelharpa, these very long, drawn-out chords. And it's pretty much on the opposite side of the spectrum from how you play the Jouhikko in a traditional way, which is very melodic. There is the drone, but the drone is just one ingredient of this traditional playing. So I think where I want to go with this is from your point of view as a traditional player who's also not very gatekeepy, you're not very Puritan. What is your take, or what is your perspective on this dynamic where the Tagelharpa or the Jouhikko is becoming very popular, but it's being played in a way that is very different from how it is traditionally played, to a degree that melodies on it are almost non-existent. Anything that you might want to say on that? I would love to hear your perspective as a more traditional Jouhikko player.
I would say that I'm happy that the Jouhikko, Tagelharpa, it's been played like more and more. Doesn't matter for me like what is the style of the music or size of the instrument. It's like I'm also happy that people are building those instruments by themselves, but also that there are more and more like a professional instrument maker who are making like pretty good instruments. So those both branches are like I like it. And well, then the fact that it is not very easy instrument to play, because to produce the sound is you have to spend some time to get like some kind of proper steady sound out of it. And then after that you have spent some time to get like right spots here. So I totally understand that the kind of easiest way to get this Tagelharpa part of the like band sound is play mainly like kind of open strings, maybe not very many notes, and having the sound and having the feeling of that instrument, of that music. And I'm totally cool of that. I'm happy with that. But that's one way to use that instrument. But then, as you said, then if you want to play more melody on it, then you just have to practice.
But I don't wanna.
But you and maybe I would say this way. Then you just need to like to play it more and more, and then you will learn. So
which goes back that goes back to what you said about the like what kind of Tagelharpa do you have? If you have one of those massive bass ones, it's not going to be fun to try, and it's also not going to sound very good if you try and play melodies. But if you get yourself a little one, maybe it might be a little bit more enticing.
yes, and maybe I can just like just say clearly why is it difficult to play melodies with the big one. It's just this physical fact that it's same than like playing melodies with a contra, like a double bass. Here you have to be like pretty long hand, and this size of Jouhikko, my fingers are like on this position. It's really natural. You don't have to do like this. And also when the tuning is like the string length is like shorter, the tuning is higher, and then when you are playing with the drone, you can hear the melody very clearly. Because when the tuning is like high, it's like really hearable. But if it's tuning very low, it's not. It's difficult to hear the melody because it's just this music, like physical facts that when there are like low notes pretty near to each others, you can't hear it. Like it's like. That's the reason, basically.
Yeah. And in some ways, that can actually be like the sound that people want, you know? Like it adds to that mysterious sound if it's down deep and in minor and it sounds all spooky, you know? And I completely understand what you're talking about with the lower notes farther apart are harder to play. You know, I am a contrabass player, and whenever I want to play a melody, I'm going all the way up the fretboard and I'm playing in thumb position, which is very difficult to do, but it's worth it because if I try and play a melody all the way down at the lowest range of the instrument, you know, I play both contrabass and mandolin. This distance on my fingers is a half step on the bass. But then I pick up a mandolin, and that's like 2 octaves. So it's all about flexibility with the fingers, and you know, does the instrument accommodate that kind of playing? And you know, I think this is a great. This is what I was hoping would happen, is that this segues pretty well into, you know, so there's enough room for both, right? There's enough room for the style of playing Tagelharpa that is very droning with only 1 or 2 notes. And there's also more than enough room for the melodic players. But this is one of the reasons why I'm so happy to you know, host you here, is because it's very difficult for people to learn how to even go about making the next step, right? I think a lot of the reasons that people don't make the next steps after learning those first 2 notes is because it's not easy to figure out what to do next. And you know, I will recommend that for anyone who wants to learn that, listen to this album, Jouhikko. But what advice would you have for people who do want to learn how to play more melodically, or what would you recommend for people who want to learn more in depth, or the next steps or more techniques around playing the Tagelharpa?
One thing I would recommend is to learn this technique, to use your like finger backs. It feels at first like awkward or
it does.
Or like
it feels so weird,
weird, difficult. But I can promise you, if you're just spending a little bit time, it will feel really natural, and actually it will start to feel like enjoyable. And that's because we are not doing anything like human activity with that direction. So that's new thing. So I think there are some new connections on our brains when we are starting to do that. But I'm suggesting this on 2 reasons. This is like harder surface here compared with the fingertips and compared with the front. And also this is part of carrying this tradition. So if you want to play kind of a tradition way, you can start with this. I have to say also that I'm not judging at all any way people are playing. I play whatever you want. But if you are starting to play this instrument, why not start to play this this way? And then try to buy a proper instrument, because it helps a lot if the sound is like possible to play, and then just try to get information and ask for example, from me about the strings, about the tunings.
Hmm.
So and then I'm teaching also, by the way, like online if somebody wants. So then after all, you have like those like basic knowledge of the start. After that, it's really enjoyable and ergonomic instrument, I would say, because on violin it's like a over this hard level, but this Jouhikko, you can just sit. Okay, now it's you can't see my hands, but really it's really like a relaxed position to play. So I'm encouraging just keep going, and it's not like a difficult instrument after you have this like proper instrument, proper tuning. Then yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually that's probably the best advice you can give in terms of making sure you get a good instrument, because I have seen it happen so many times where people will buy a Tagelharpa or a Jouhikko off of Etsy, and then they get it in the mail, and it doesn't work. And it's unfortunate that happens, but it is worthwhile to not only do a little bit more research on instrument makers, but to spend the money that you should probably spend on an instrument. Otherwise, I've seen it happen where I have friends who have spent $100 to $200 on a Jouhikko off of Etsy, and then they get it and they can't even play it. Where, yeah, it might have been cheaper to buy, but now you can't even play it. So it ends up being wasted money in the first place. I've had many friends who are like, hey, can you show me how to play this? And I pick it up. I can't even get a sound out of it. And I can typically get a sound out of anything with strings. And but it starts with, if you don't get an instrument that will actually play, then it does two things. First, it wastes your money. But second, it creates this false perception that you are the problem, that you can't play. But in reality, it's that instrument that cannot make a melody. And so you're not even allowing yourself the opportunity to be able to learn how to play it because your instrument can't play a melody.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then if you have a good instrument and if you don't want to play anymore, it's not a problem to sell. It's a good instrument. So you will get your money, I don't know, back, but pretty much. But if you have like bad instrument, then there you are.
And so actually, do you think it would be a good idea to actually just say that if people want any guidance going forward, they could shoot you an email or a message or anything like that?
Of course.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Then I'll link that in the YouTube description or the podcast description, so people can. Yeah, so now you have permission from Lassi himself. If you have any questions and you're serious about wanting to learn how to play, Lassi would be more than happy to help guide you in terms of who you should buy an instrument from, or techniques, or he just said he offers online lessons. But Lassi, I think before I let you go here, I realized that I forgot to ask a very important question about the album that I'm very interested in, and that is, I know that picking a favorite tune off of the album can feel like picking a favorite child. But I would love to hear if there are any melodies in particular or any tunes in particular off of this album that have really stuck with you. Which one would it be?
Yeah. I have the album here, by the way. It's only like a LP as a physical format, but digital like more. By the way, I want to say about this picture.
Yeah.
It's me playing at our living room in Oslo. So I was thinking like what kind of album cover I would like to have, and because this Jouhikko is pretty rare instrument, I would like to just simple thoughts that I would like to people see that how is it played. And then it's also about this concept of solo playing. I just wanted to have a picture where I'm playing somewhere that I would play in real life also,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like on top of the mountain or something. And that's why I choose that. Okay, it's our living room I have been playing mostly. So
Yep.
it's kind of it's kind of idea that I'm kind of inviting to listener to sit at our sofa and listen my playing. Okay, the amount of reverb on the album is a bit more than our living room, but that's I
I think it was
decided.
tasteful. I think it was
Yeah,
tasteful. I liked the amount of it.
yeah. I wanted to. That was kind of. I thought that putting a little bit more reverb, it could be. How can I say this? People are used to listen music with certain kind of
Yeah, yeah.
certain amount of reverb. So this living room acoustic would be maybe too like a kind of rough. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure anymore. Was that a good choice? On the other hand, this living room reverb would be maybe really honest and part of this kind of concept we talked earlier about
Mhm.
the solo playing. But okay, maybe on the next album.
Yeah.
Okay, but now, yeah, you asked me to choose one.
Yeah, not even necessarily the favorites,
Yeah, yeah,
but if
just
there's
like
any
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah, stuck with you.
yeah. Well, I can say, for example, the song "Sunsets in Eikkaberg."
I had a feeling you were going to say that one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Um, we are living in Oslo, in just next to the fjord,
Mhm.
and we are living like 60 meters above the sea level. So every evening we are watching the sunsets there, and it's the hill we are living is the same hill than Edvard Munch was painting
I've been
his
there. I've been
his
there. Yeah, yeah.
scream painting
Hmm.
about the sunset.
Hmm.
So that's the name. I picked that name like about those evenings. And it's stylistically it's a polska, and for me it's kind of Swedish
Hmm.
type of triplet
Hmm.
polska, and it has 6 notes as mentioned earlier. So that's maybe one which pretty close
Yeah, I'm
for
glad you
me.
mentioned that one because I'm in
Yeah.
Oslo for a couple days every August, and this
Mm,
time I had a friend who is in religious studies at the university.
mm,
He gave me a personal tour of the whole city
mm.
because every time I go by myself, I tend to just go to the cemetery where all the famous musicians and artists are, and I have my little bubble of what I'm familiar with. Um,
Mm.
but this summer, for the first time, I had a personalized tour from a friend, and he took me all the way up. I'm pretty sure that the hill, yeah, Eikeberg, where you go
Yeah, yeah.
all the way to the top, and you see the little burial stones and all of that.
Yes,
But
yes.
I also
Yeah.
remember that spot because it was sunset for us, and I remember
Oh, okay.
we were at sunset, and he was like, "Do you know the Scream?" And I said, of
Yeah,
course I know the
yeah,
Scream. I'm
yeah,
not a
yeah,
rube."
yeah.
And he pointed at that little box that they have set up where you can sort of look at where it was.
Yes,
And so I'm glad that you
yeah,
brought this one up
yeah.
because now I know
Okay.
that I can rightfully associate that melody with that very first hike I ever did up Eikeberg.
Yes.
So I love it,
Nice.
and I should remember if you're in Oslo next time I'm in, I should definitely grab
Just
coffee or something,
yeah, yeah.
because
Just contact me. Like yeah,
yeah,
we'll
you
meet
know I
there.
will. All right, so
Yeah.
Lassi, this is I've learned so much from this conversation, and that's my favorite. That's why I do this. It is the people who listen to the podcast are secondary. This is mostly for me, where I do really
Yeah.
love learning from musicians such as yourself, and I think this was definitely a very educational and informative talk, at least from my point of view. And
Thank
I'm
you.
very thankful that you've made the time on Finnish Independence Day to come and talk about the Jouhikko on the Nordic Sound. So before I let you go, if people want to learn more about you, follow you, where can they do so? And also, if you just want to say what your email is, and then I'll put it, down below. Just any way that people can follow you or get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, nice, nice. It has been truly a pleasure to talk with you,
Mhm.
Jameson, and I'm happy with this. Happy that this happened.
Yeah, this
And
was many
yeah,
months planning.
yeah,
The
yes.
I stopped telling my patrons who I'm
Mm,
interviewing because
mm,
I'll say who I'm talking to, and then months go by, and
mm,
because that is
mhm.
just how it goes. And
Yes,
but persistence is key, right? But that I'm
yeah,
so glad that we finally, because we started talking in September, and
something like that. Yeah,
it's now December. So
yes,
yeah, a long time coming, but I'm so happy that you made the time.
yeah. Thanks for you. And yeah, have a nice day there. Here it's like evening already.
Yeah, I can see that in
Yeah,
your window. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
yes,
please hang out after I stop the recording, just so we can
yeah.
talk a little bit more. But
Okay,
otherwise, Lassi, thank you so
okay,
much. I'm sure many people love to hear from you, and you have a great rest of your Finnish Independence Day. All right.
yes. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye
Of
bye.
course.